conversation with our special guest, Dave Pasch, who was the radio voice of the Arizona Cardinals. Dave, what we do here on Sportscaster Chronicles is we talk about sports announcers. And you are a guy who, you already alluded to that earlier, you spent your schooling on the East Coast, that being Syracuse University. And if a lot of people don't know about Syracuse University, folks, it's kind of the Harvard of sports announcers. If you really want to be a sports announcer and get the best training and education, well, you go to Syracuse. And just to name a few of the great graduates that have come out of here, out of Syracuse, going back to the early days of Marty Glickman, the late great Marty Glickman, who kind of started the movement, Marv Albert, Dick Stockton, Bob Costas, Dave O'Brien, Ian Eagle, and now Dave Pasch has come out of there. Was this always kind of a dream for you, Dave, to be a sports announcer?
You know, I think early on in my life when I realized that I wasn't good enough to play it, I wanted to be involved in it, that I had to look elsewhere. And, I think sportscasting was it. Syracuse, I became interested in Syracuse because of watching them on ESPN on college basketball. That was in the late 80s when I was in early 90s. And Dick Vitale was doing a Syracuse game talking about Marv Albert and Marty Glickman and some of the other names you mentioned. And I became a Syracuse basketball fan because they were on all the time. and I grew up in the Midwest. I really had no connections there, but they were on and they were winning. And when you're a kid, you seem to lock onto teams that are winning. And Syracuse was kind of a national team. It's almost like being a Packer fan out in Arizona. The Packers are a national team, and I think Syracuse falls into that category. You get a lot of Syracuse fans all over the country, and I became one of them, and that's how I found out about the broadcast school.
Wow. So again, it really wasn't. It was you being a sports fan and watching television and just kind of becoming a Syracuse fan, which drew you to the university. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how it came about. And when I got to Syracuse, I think one of the things that really helped me was getting involved with the radio station there. And when you're, in high school, you don't really know. You just think, okay, I'll just go to school and study and, go work at CBS or at ESPN.
Yeah.
But, when you get there, you realize just how competitive it is and, all the other extracurricular things you need to do besides going to class.
Yeah. Dave, you said you grew up in the Midwest. Who were some of your favorite sports announcers growing up? Who were guys that you really liked to listen to, enjoyed their style, kind of got off on them?
Yeah, I used to listen a lot to the Milwaukee Brewer games with Pat Hughes and Bob Uecker. And, I used to go to bed listening to them at night. I would even tape some of the games on a cassette and listen to them at night, even though they were games that, you got 162 games. This might have been a game from 2 months ago. I enjoyed listening to those guys, and it was very comfortable to listen to. In terms of television, I would say Bob Costas, Marv Albert were two guys in particular. Marv for the play-by-play side of it, Bob for the studio side in particular, and just watching these guys and just the way they handle themselves on the air, the professionalism, but also just the personalities. And growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, you didn't have a lot of pro sports teams that were in your area. Obviously, you had the Brewers, you had the Bucks, and you'd get WGN, so you had some Chicago sports. But
right.
ESPN wasn't that big yet. So, if you were growing up in Boston, you had Nesson, or in New York, you had MSG. So you had, or Fox Sports New York, you had a way to get your teams and to see, I just either had the local guys or, Marv Albert and Bob Costas. And then once ESPN got big, that's when I started to learn more about sportscasting and about Syracuse.
Right. Again, our special guest, Dave Pasch of ESPN and radio voice of the Arizona Cardinals. Dave, you're a guy who obviously does work a lot of television for ESPN. And then on Sundays during the fall, you leak back into the radio booth. Outside of the cliche differences that I've talked to a million sports announcers, and they all say, on radio you get to paint the word pictures more of you get to be more creative. On the television side, you're basically just setting up the analyst to make him or her sound good, and you kind of focus in on the play-by-play a little bit. outside of that, what are some of the differences to you? What medium do you enjoy working on most? Is it radio or television, or it's just work to you? What is it?
Well, I think television is the most challenging. I think because you're doing storytelling.
You got that producer screaming in your ear all the
time,
right?
And it's funny, you just kind of get used to it. Like, I know there are some guys who don't like it, and it doesn't really bother me. I don't know, you get used to it. You get used to somebody talking in your ear and listening with the other ear to yourself and to what your analyst is saying. But you've got... You have to work in graphics and pay attention to the monitor and watch the game and listen to your analysts. In radio, even though you're listening to your analysts, it almost like a lot of times you're on two separate islands. You're doing your thing, and then when the play's over, the analyst jumps in. And again, there's banter back and forth, but for the most part, you're worrying about calling the game. There's not a lot of storytelling, especially when you're doing a local team, because the local team or the local fans don't care about the other team, number one. And number two, they know most of the stories that go along with the players on your team. So you're really just calling the game, where when you're doing television, you're kind of unveiling the team to an audience that, yes, you're going to have people that know them, but you're assuming that most of your audience is unaware of some of the bigger storylines and some of the smaller storylines that you have to unveil to them over the course of the telecast.
This Sunday is it's a big event, Dave. It's football. It's playoff football. Things are taken to a new level. Do you find yourself is your mindset a little bit parallel to the players? You kind of find yourself getting a little more jacked up for the big events than you would, say, a regular season game or a preseason game, or is it pretty much the same?
No, I absolutely get fired up. Especially after last year's run, and that's one of the great things about being able to do a local team as well as doing the national games, is you really get involved emotionally in what you're doing. Not that you don't from a national TV standpoint, but obviously you have to remain unbiased, where in local radio you can be completely biased. And
you can be a homer.
You can be a homer. Yeah, and a fair homer. You can't. Fans see right through it when you're over the top. But in terms of being emotionally tied in, you have to, because if you're not, then it takes away from your call. It takes away from the broadcast. Fans know it. They want to hang on your words, and if you're not emotionally buying in, if you're just doing it just to do it, then they know that. And so and this is my 8th year doing the Cardinals, so I'm pretty much seen everything here over the last 8 years, from the old stadium to the new stadium to 3 different coaching eras to from a 4-win team to a 10-win team to a Super Bowl team. So, I feel like I'm, in a situation where it's legitimate when I get excited about what's going on, and when I'm not excited because the team's not playing well.
Right. Dave, we're going to leave it there. We wish you luck on the broadcast this Sunday, and we'll be checking in down the road.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks, John.
That's it for this week's show. Again, thank you to our special guest, Dave Pasch, radio voice of the Arizona Cardinals. Keep logging on, fans, to Sportscaster Chronicles for new shows and updates. Until then, for Sportscaster Chronicles, this is John Lewis.